There's a moment that hits almost every Westerner after spending a few weeks in Asia. It usually happens somewhere unexpected, maybe while walking through a night market in Thailand, or sitting in a quiet cafe in Vietnam, or watching the sunset hit the skyline in Manila or Kuala Lumpur. It's not loud, it's not dramatic. It's just a small voice in the back of your mind whispering, "Why does life feel easier here? Why does this feel right?" And once that question enters your head, it doesn't leave. It grows, it expands, and eventually it becomes something impossible to ignore. Because right now, Westerners aren't just traveling to Asia, they're relocating, they're leaving, they're escaping, and they're not doing it quietly, they're doing it in waves. For years, people joked about moving to Thailand or finding peace in Bali, but in 2026, it's no longer a meme. It's a migration. It's a shift in global energy, and it's happening faster than anyone predicted. If you've been paying attention, you already know this isn't just about beaches, cheap rent, or good weather. Something deeper is happening, something cultural, something emotional, something spiritual, something that reflects the reality that millions of Westerners feel like strangers in their own countries. They feel drained, they feel disconnected, they feel like the values around them shifted into something unrecognizable. And the places that once felt like home now feel like pressure cookers where every day feels heavier than the last. Meanwhile, Asia feels alive. It feels hopeful. It feels like movement, progress, community, possibility. There's opportunity and energy. There's warmth and friendliness. There's a sense of being able to breathe again. And when you combine the push from the West with the pull of Asia, the migration suddenly makes perfect sense. For a lot of Westerners, the first shock happens when they land in Asia and realize how much more human the daily interactions feel. A cashier smiles at you. A taxi driver actually talks to you. A stranger you asked for directions walks you halfway to your destination. People here still treat each other like people instead of obstacles. And that tiny difference alone is enough to make some men say, "Wow, I forgot this was possible." Then you feel the financial difference. A meal that would cost 20 euros or $30 back home suddenly costs 2 or 3. Rent that would choke you in the West becomes cheaper than your monthly phone bill. You see young Westerners living like kings, even on modest incomes, not because they're rich, but because Asia hasn't crushed its middle class the way the West has. And you see older Western men who were ignored, forgotten, or financially squeezed in their home countries suddenly rediscover peace, dignity, and social life. Once you experience that shift, it becomes very hard to pretend the West is normal anymore. But there's more to it. There's the work culture. In Asia, people still hustle, but the hustle has purpose. In the West, everything feels like burnout disguised as productivity. You work more but get less. You pay taxes but see nothing improve. You follow rules that make no sense. You compete with systems that weren't designed for humans. And deep down, many people realize they're living in a loop where the finish line keeps moving farther away. Then they visit Asia and realize that time moves differently here. There's still ambition, but the pressure is different. People don't look at you like you're weird if you're not stressed. People don't treat work as their entire personality. People don't brag about being exhausted. They're still human beings, not machines pretending to be human. And the contrast hits hard. What really pushes people over the edge, though, is the vibe. That's the part no economist can measure. It's the feeling that the West is collapsing socially, culturally, mentally. Everyone's angry, everyone's divided, everyone's suspicious of each other. Politics turned into a never ending battle. Dating became a minefield. Neighborhoods became expensive but soulless. People are surrounded by technology but more lonely than ever. Anxiety feels like the default mood. And instead of fixing anything, the system keeps doubling down on more complexity, more rules, more noise. Meanwhile, Asia feels like a place where life is still life, where people go outside, where families still sit together, where people still fall in love, where food is cooked with care, where cities are messy but alive, where you can walk around and feel anonymous but not invisible, where you can be a foreigner yet not feel like an enemy, where imperfection feels comforting instead of suffocating. It's not that Asia is perfect. Far from it. Asia has its own problems, pressures, and realities. But The energy is rising, not falling. You feel momentum, you feel hunger, you feel optimism, and optimism is addictive. Westerners didn't leave their countries because Asia offered perfection. They left because Asia offered possibility. Once you start noticing the divide, it becomes impossible to unsee it. A Westerner walks through a mall in Bangkok and sees families shopping together, kids laughing, old people actually going outside instead of being locked away somewhere. In Saigon, you see people sitting on street corners, drinking tea, talking to each other face to face instead of through screens. In Manila, you see people take life day by day and still find reasons to smile, even though they have far less than the average person in Europe. In Bali, you see communities built around healing, fitness, creativity, spirituality, entrepreneurship, things that the West squeezed out with cynicism and overwork. Westerners move to Asia because they feel alive here. And when a man finds a place that makes him feel alive after years of numbness, he doesn't need much more convincing. But let's talk about the elephant in the room: dating. It doesn't matter how politically correct someone tries to be. Dating is a massive factor in why so many Western men are moving to Asia. In the West, dating is a battlefield. Expectations are mismatched, connection is rare, politics infiltrates everything. People talk more about red flags than actual romance. Standards are extreme. Men don't feel wanted, women feel exhausted. Apps turned intimacy into an auction. In Asia, dating feels more natural. Women are feminine, men can be masculine. Relationships don't feel like legal negotiations. People actually smile on dates. Women aren't ashamed of wanting affection or commitment. Men aren't shamed for wanting peace and cooperation. And even though things are changing, even though modern influences are creeping in, the core dynamic is still far healthier than what most Western men are used to. This doesn't mean men come to Asia because of women. Many don't. But for those who do, the reason is simple. For the first time in their lives, they feel seen. They feel appreciated. They feel attractive, not because of money, but because not every interaction is a competition for status. Western men in Asia often feel like they stepped into a reality where men and women still complement each other, not compete with each other. But beyond dating, there's something deeper. Western men come to Asia because they feel their masculinity isn't punished here. In the West, many men feel like everything about them is wrong by default. Wrong tone, wrong opinion, wrong desire, wrong ambition, wrong approach. Everything is about what men shouldn't be rather than what they could be. Asia doesn't treat men like defective machines. It treats them like human beings with roles that matter, contributions that matter, presence that matters. And when a man lives in a place where being a man isn't treated like a flaw, he thrives. The funny thing is that many Westerners don't plan to stay long. They come for a month, then stay 3. They extend their visa, they try another country, they make friends, they build routines, and slowly, without realizing it, Asia becomes home. Not because they forced it, but because the energy fit their soul more than the place they came from. Asia is becoming a lifeboat for a generation that feels disconnected from everything happening in the West. It's not about being rich, it's about being free. It's about reclaiming time, it's about reconnecting to life. It's about remembering that life isn't supposed to feel like a punishment, whether it's Thailand, Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia, Cambodia, Japan, Korea, or the Philippines. The pattern is the same. Westerners come here because they want peace, growth, community, sunlight, human connection, and a fresh start. They don't want to fight their society anymore. They want to live. And maybe that's the biggest reason of all. Asia gives people permission to start over. It doesn't care who you used to be. It doesn't care what mistakes you made. It doesn't care what job you had, what status you held, or what box society tried to put you into. Asia lets you rewrite your story in real time. And that's something the West forgot how to offer. If you're watching this because you've been thinking about moving, traveling, or starting a new life somewhere in Asia, I want to hear your thoughts. What's pulling you toward this part of the world? What are you running from or running toward? Drop a comment and let's talk about it.